Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope everybody is having a beautiful day. I hope that the sun is shining. I hope that the birds are singing and the wind is at your back. I have with me today the great Chuck Wisner, and I want to introduce him. In the space between stimulus and response lies the true essence of leadership and growth, a space that Chuck Wisner has spent decades mastering. Drawing from his rich background as an architect, a mediator, and transformational coach, Chuck has dedicated the last 30 years to helping individuals and organizations unlock their potential by understanding the untapped power of conversations. His journey from the creative but often contentious world of architecture to becoming a trusted advisor for Fortune 200 companies like Google, Apple, and Tesla is a testament to his ability to dissect complex human dynamics and reframe them for personal and professional transformation. Chuck's methods are rooted in the art and science of conversations, where the stories we unconsciously tell ourselves shape our interactions and outcomes. He believes that by becoming mindful of these narratives, we can shift from reaction to thoughtful response, fostering not only leadership excellence, but true human growth. His work, shaped by his time with Peter Senge at MIT's Center for Organizational Learning and refined through years of consulting with high-profile leaders, speaks to the profound impact of deliberate and conscious communication. Today, Chuck is a sought-after thought leader who helps guide leaders and teams in some of the world's most innovative companies, offering them the tools to navigate complexity with clarity and confidence. His life and work remind us that in every conversation lies the potential for growth, freedom, and transformation. Let's dive into the mind of a man who has spent his career teaching others how to harness that potential. Chuck, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. That was a generous introduction.
Well, you got a new book out called The Art of Conscious Conversation, and I think that you have spoken the language of experience throughout your life, and I just want to bring that to the audience.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and let me just jump right in here. You know, a lot of the times, most of my audience, I think, has probably read Viktor Frankl, and we know that great quote about the space between words and meaning. But Viktor Frankl spoke of a space between stimulus and response. How can we consciously expand that space within our conversations to allow for more authentic, transformative communication?
Well, that space is complex. There's multiple dimensions there. For one, we are in conversations like fish in water. We grow up learning how to converse and interact through our family, our parents, and our cultures. And so that means that all the we pick up these patterns unconsciously, and then we replay them over and over and over again. And depending on our life experience, those patterns might shift and we might learn something else. But that's sort of that notion that we're in conversation without full awareness. So that's one dimension, which I like sometimes I talk to as like being on autopilot, which plays out to our reactions. Because if we're on autopilot in our thinking and we have a regular pattern of reacting, then we don't have that space to go, wait a minute, I don't have to do it that way. I can do it this way. The second is there's often a huge gap between our private conversation, what we have going on, the chatter, the monkeys in the mind going on, and what we say out loud. And that is, my theory is that the bigger that gap, the more stress we live in. Because if I'm internally upset and negative and cursing and swearing and judging, but I'm saying nice things on the outside, that's an incredible sort of individual sort of level of stress. So there's work to be done there. And then, so the reason the book is divided into 4 types of conversations, and the first conversation is storytelling. And it's so important that that's first, because it's fundamental. That if we don't understand and we don't investigate and we don't work with our own stories, the ones that help us and the ones that hinder us, ones that help us are beautiful. I mean, we go to cocktail parties, we tell stories about our work, about our kids. Stories are a beautiful thing. We love fiction and life is rich. But then there are stories that hinder us and get in our way. And if we don't investigate those and we don't investigate our conversational patterns, we don't know how to change that space and change our reactions. So there's a bit of a learning curve that we have to do our work, which then affects how we interact with other people and our ability to do it better, which reverberates through all the other conversations.
I love that description. Thank you. I think it speaks to if we see that gap as being able to be widened, if we're conscious about it, how do you think, I can't help but reflect on like the printing press and the written word versus the spoken word. It seems if we talk about storytellers, like we come from the lineage of storytellers, from the mythologies, or, sitting by a campfire, listening to our elders on some level. And then all of a sudden, boom, the printing press. And we have these ideas like exact repeatability. How do you think, do you think that maybe that has shortened that gap? Like we went from storytelling narratives, and we still do on some level, but now we have these concepts like exact repeatability that get in the way of interpretation.
It certainly has had an effect, and the printing press, and then radio, and then TV, and then the internet, and now artificial intelligence, right? All those things are all evolutionary things. But there's a fundamental distinction that says Muriel Rickhauser is a poet, and she a lovely, I might have her name, might be pronouncing her name wrong, but she has a quote that says, the world isn't made of atoms, it's made of stories.
I love it.
And I just love that because, and the other person I really love his thinking is Yuval Harari, who wrote the book Sapiens, Homo Sapiens. And what it means is that through all these changes and all this evolution of technology, fundamentally, we interact, we converse, we believe through stories.
Yep.
And the damning part of that is when we have our story and we have no space in our mind or our heart for other stories. So everything from religion, I mean, money is a story, and law is a story, and religion, mythologies are stories. But when we get attached to our stories and our ego is engaged in our stories, that totally changes the dynamic of who we can be and how we show up in conversation.
It's interesting that you bring up poetry on that level, because it seems to me that poetry is a way in which we can merge not only linguistics and words, but feeling. And it also broadens that idea of awareness on some level. Do you think that we're like, how do we get to have more meaningful conversations? I know that in your book, you talk a little bit about surface communications. Everybody's in a hurry to tell like this sort of side monologue, or they want to talk just briefly about substance stuff. But how do we get to more meaningful conversations in today's world?
Well, I think so. The first practice, and I think of practices because if we want to change how we are in conversation, there's no magic switch. If there were a magic switch, I'd be a rich man. I'd say, hey, you want to have a different conversation? Pay me $5,000. I'll switch the switch, and boom, you'd pay me, or someone would pay me.
Totally.
Right. But there's no magic switch. So awareness is key, is step one. Awareness of our patterns. We all have conversational patterns, interaction patterns, right? We all have triggers, right? So awareness of our triggers, awareness of our patterns, awareness of our strengths and weaknesses, right? I had an event with a neighbor just the other day that here I am. I've written the book. I've been in this business for a long time. I got really triggered because they were doing something what by my standards was unfair, didn't make any sense, had no logic to it, no feeling to it. And I was triggered. And I told them, I said, I'm really angry. This just doesn't make sense, right? So this notion of being aware of all those things, that's what opens the window when we can start saying, I don't have to react that way. There's a better way to understand. And so when I dissect and deconstruct conversations by looking at 4 types and then 4 or 4 archetypal elements of each type. We're taking them apart so that we can hear, think about, and be in conversations in a new way, right? So one of my teachers, Rafael Echeverria, said, if I took you to Alaska and we lived with the Inuits for 3 months or something, we would learn their 20 to 30 names for snow, because each name has a reason that it's named that way, whether it's good for building igloos or whatever. They have these distinctions about snow. And if we learned them and understood them, when I came back to New England, I live in Boston. When I came back to New England, I would never see snow the same way, right? Because now I've been given these thoughts and ideas differently. And so I love that, because that's how I was taught to say there's new ways to think about conversations. There's new ways to understand conversations so that you can make the change, so you can be more effective and you can be more productive or humble or whatever your goal wants to be, your desire needs to be.
I love it. It's interesting to the metaphors and imagery that we use. If you learn the 10 different words for snow, you'll never see that way again. Can you help us understand that a little bit, like the relationship between linguistics and imagery in our mind, and how maybe you could unpack that? I know it's a huge topic, but I mean, can you help us dig deeper into that?
Yeah. It's an interesting one, because there's a couple dimensions. Because at one level, having a new name for something or a new distinction about something, it's not just, it is the name, but it's also understanding the why is it named that way, because it's a particular thing, it has a particular function, right? That what it does is, our storytelling brain, we definitely have a part of our brain that's storytelling, has new information that it then puts into the pot of our history and the pot of our patterns, right? And says, oh, wow, I can't look at that innocently anymore. Or I can't look at that with judgment anymore. Or I can't look at that as in such an arrogant way, because now I understand there's another side to the story. Or I understand that they're not doing that to be a jerk. They're doing that because they don't know any better. So there's this, it's like a little mini awakening. You can see something with new light, right? And that makes a difference. Now, on the other hand, there are teachers like Eckhart Tolle, who wrote his lovely book. What's his book called?
Power of Now.
The Power of Now. Thank you. It says, when we label things, we're separating from them. So there's that deeper thing. We aren't labeling to separate from, we're labeling to my idea of distinctions is labeling to better understand. And that which really broadens how we can think about something. If we're thinking narrowly, we can now have think about it in a broader, bigger, holistic context.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's such a double-edged sword, this power of language that we have that helps us define the world around us, but simultaneously puts blinders on us. There's a great story by Terence McKenna who talks about language, and he says, think about a baby who sees a bird for the first time, and he sees this fluttering little fairy monster fly into the room, and it's a hummingbird, and his mind is abuzz with all these colors and flapping and sounds, and we go, look, Timmy, there's a hummingbird. Like, we've just stripped the imagination from them.
Yeah,
it's so crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, right. So the idea is, how do you hold both? My wife is an artist, and some of the work that we've done is like learning to hold opposites. We tend to get stuck on one path or one way of seeing, but if we can learn to hold opposites, and that's true with a lot of my clients. They want to sort of do better at their job, but they want to explore what else is out there, and they get torn. And I say, well, you can do both. You hold them together. Do both. Where our mind is big enough to do that, but it's like everything else, it's a practice. It takes a little bit of time. When we're thinking about changing our conversational patterns, or we're thinking about holding opposites, what we're doing is we're messing around with the neurons in our brain,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
Well, that ain't no small thing. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a little bit of time. And so as I've been doing this work, I developed a theory which I call the pendulum, that if you think about a vertical line that is the vertical line of real time now, and then something happens in the moment that you get triggered, or something happens that upsets you, right? And you have your triggered reaction, your emotional reaction. You do something stupid in a meeting, you call someone a name, you get angry at your neighbor, whatever. You have this reaction, right, that doesn't serve very well. And well, if you then say, well, okay, 2 hours later, you go, oh, why did I friggin' say that? Why did
Yeah.
I do that? Right?
Yeah.
That is a moment. That is a small awakening. You go, whoa, I didn't have to do it that way. I could do it a different way. And then you investigate what your trigger was, what your concerns were, what you wanted to have happen, what your standards are. There's these 4 elements that I talk about in the book:
Yeah.
desires, concerns, power issues, authority, and standards. You do that, you go, wow, what was I concerned about? What are my standards? And you literally learn from that. And then the next time, maybe that same person or a similar meeting or a similar event happens, instead of 2 hours later, but the work you've done, the practice you've done, you pull it to 2 minutes. So you're still in the meeting and you go, oh, that was the stupidest thing to say. You have time in the meeting to go, I'm really sorry about what I just did, because here's what I was really concerned about. And I sort of didn't speak well, but now I want to explain my thinking and why I felt the way I felt. That's an incredible shift. If you can do that real time. And it takes practice, to move that pendulum from 2 hours to 1 hour to 2 minutes to real time.
I love that. Without giving away the secret sauce, can you is that it sounds to me like you're leaving breadcrumbs on the trail for yourself to stop. Hey, this is a desire issue. This is a power issue, or this is a shadow issue. Is there some sort of exercise that you allow people to walk through to help themselves recognize that faster so they can do it in real time?
Yeah, sure. And so I sort of think of there's the 4 conversations in the book:
Okay.
storytelling, collaborative, creative, and commitment. But then in each conversation, there are these 4 elements. And the 4 elements are so simple. And that's what I love about them, because they're universal, they're archetypal.
Nice.
And you can, so I think of them as a little template, a little cheat sheet, hell, you can put it on you can put it on a sticky note,
Yep.
and, you're in a Zoom call, you put it on your sticky note, and because every judgment we have, every perspective we have, unconsciously or consciously, both happen, we have these 4 elements. If we have a judgment, we're judging because we have a desire and something's not happening that aligns with that desire. Or we have a fear that we can't meet our goal, or we have a fear that we can't get what we want. Desires are a beautiful thing because they inspire us and they give us ambition, but they're also a huge trap, because for many people, our desires don't align with reality. I have an example. I don't know if it's in the book or not. I can't remember, about a young man I was working with who really wanted his next promotion to be the director of a pretty large energy company, and he was convinced that the job was his. He wanted it really badly. He was really ambitious, and he was convinced that it was his. He did his, he's been working hard. That was his desire. He didn't get the job, and he got to work with me because he was triggered, and his boss said, "You better talk to Chuck." Anyway, what would Chuck say? But he we did some work, and he realized that his desire was not aligned with reality, in that the people he worked with, his colleagues and his bosses, really didn't see him how he saw himself. And he never got, so the two-edged sword, he never got that feedback, right? But he was also locked into his own story about I'm the best, right? Which, guess what? If he thought he was the best, he was showing up as arrogant. They didn't see him as humble. He was showing up as arrogant. They didn't see him as collaborative, right? So once he did that work, he wrote, what he was doing was investigating, okay, what did I want? I wanted this job. Did it align with reality? I don't know. You know, what are the power issues at play? Well, you have bosses. What do they really think of you? You know, and what are your standards for this job? And what are their standards? So people had different standards about what it meant to be a director, and his standards were, I've done my hard work. I'm a good guy. I can do it. I can do the job. But if their standard is to be more collaborative, and their standard is to be more humble, you know, creative but humble, and work with other people, that's not how he saw him. So he suffered, right?
Yeah.
But we just walked through those so he could sort of take, you know, it's not that he didn't know it, he was just blind to it. So we take the blinders off, and he can see, oh wow, I've been acting like I deserved this job, like I was the prince or something, or I was the arrogant one, and no wonder I didn't get the job. He changed dramatically, and within 6 months he had a new job. Promotion.
At a new company? Oh.
No, same one.
Okay.
Yeah. He did the work. Yeah. So I tell that story to illustrate these simple things that allow us to investigate our own thinking and our own patterns and our own reactions, right? It tempers our ego. We can become more emotionally intelligent. We have, when we do that, then we have choices because we're seeing things differently. We have new ideas and new ways of thinking about things. And then we can say, oh, you know what? I can try on some new things. I can try to be more collaborative. And what does that, then that's work. Well, what does that mean to be more collaborative? You know, so those 4 things are beautiful self-investigations. But guess what? They're also incredibly handy to in collaborative conversations, when you're what I call mutual learning conversations, where there's multiple perspectives and we're trying to understand different perspectives. If I come into a conversation with a fist, that's my ego, that's my righteousness, that's my arrogance saying, this is the answer, this is how it should be, this is what we should be doing. Guess what? Other people come with their fist, and you know, we're battling. And we've all been in meetings like that where people are just saying, well, that's stupid, we should do it this way. Yeah, we did that 2 years ago. That's what. Anyway, we're like this. The questions, when you do your own work, you come in with an open hand and say, I have a position, and I'm not asking anyone to give up their position or their opinion, but I'm asking them to open their hands and say, here is why I'm thinking, here's how I'm thinking and why I'm thinking the way I am. I have concerns, I have desires, I have standards. And when we enter with an open hand, that takes some vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
We're literally opening ourselves up, and it's inviting to other people. But the 4 questions become a really great shortcut for asking questions of other people who are coming to you with a fist. So you come to me with a fist like, no, it should be this way. And I go, well, tell me, what do you want to have happen? What's not happening that you want to have happen? What are you concerned about for tomorrow? And by the way, what standards are you using to judge whether this would be successful or not, or whether this is a good idea? And just those questions, you know, you're sort of prying their fingers open.
Totally, I'm peeling it.
Yeah, right. And then they, good people will come along, and they'll go, wow, I never thought of it that way. Or I might say, see what you just told me, I never thought of it that way. Now we're in a different conversation. Now we're in a totally different, we're learning from each other, we're open, so that's the practice of a good collaborative conversation. How we advocate, how we inquire, How we ask questions, how we tell our story, how we present our position. Closed fist, open hand, open heart.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds a lot like I once heard a quote that said the difference between a manager and a leader is a manager does things right and a leader does the right thing. Obviously, there's reasons why you have to do things right versus doing the right thing, but yeah, asking questions is a powerful way in which you can open up a real dialogue. Is that something that's always possible though in today's world where we're have these sort of expectations on us if we are a manager or if we're an employee or even if we're a boss on some level? We got to meet the boards, the boards, quotas and stuff. Is that
Yeah.
possible to?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we're all of the 4 conversations.
Okay.
We love our stories.
Yep.
And we love commitment conversation. The commitment conversation is the conversation about action. Who's going to do what by when and why and how and where. That's the action. We love action conversations. Okay. We go into a meeting, a bunch of people tell their perspective, and either the boss or someone else says, okay, what are we going to do? Right? I call that the conversational bypass. Because what's going on is there's a bunch of stories, a bunch of egos, a bunch of arrogance, a bunch of judgments going on, flying around. And then, okay, but we have to make a decision. What are we going to do? And the bypass means that we're missing out the middle 2 conversations, which are the juiciest. The ability to collaborate, mutual learning, hear other perspectives, learn from each other. And then the creative, like, oh gosh, just what we talked about. There's 3 more possibilities we haven't considered. Now there's new ideas that they bubble up just because there's space in the conversation, right?
Yeah.
I don't, and I get this pushback all the time. I've worked in the auto industry and say, we don't have time for this shit.
Totally.
And my answer is you don't not have time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally does.
Because for every bypass you do, you probably have some percentage of your decisions aren't well vetted, aren't the right decision. And so I'm not talking about a 2-day offsite. I'm not talking about a 1-week seance, or I'm talking about taking a half hour to go, okay, let's just hear the different perspectives around the table, and then after that, let's say, well, what are all the possible solutions without shutting down things and without judging? What are the ideas that we now could think about that we couldn't think about a half an hour ago? It's still going to be the bosses or whatever the structure is for decision making to make a decision, but they will make a wiser decision for having done that.
It speaks to the idea of getting on the same page. Like we've all been in rooms with a tense conversation probably, or a critical conversation, and everyone's heartbeat is going, or maybe your hands are sweating or something like that. But there is something that happens if you're in that room long enough and you're willing to be open. It's all, maybe you've seen some brain chemistry feedback on that, but don't we all kind of start radiating at a similar level when we start having a real conversation?
Oh yeah, there's great research. Heart rates, people start, opening up, dialogue is, I don't know if you know the work that is done around dialogue, get people that disagree and sit in a circle, and it's a lovely process. It was Bohm, the physicist Bohm, who I think created this. And the idea is you get people that are chewing on a really tough subject, and you put them in a circle. And the rule is that you want to hear from everybody. Everybody gets to decide when they want to speak up. One person speaks at a time, and nobody, like if you're speaking and you're saying, I think that we should take route A to get to our goal, or I think we should spend this much money, or blah, 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 whatever we're doing, or family dynamics. Everyone else has to suspend their beliefs and suspend their judgment. So the next person can say, that was really a stupid idea. That's a rule breaker, right?
Yes.
You just had to say, well, here's what I say. Here's my standard. Here's what my worries are. Here's what my concerns are. And over time, the room starts getting into sync. The mind and the heart start getting into sync. And this has worked with union folks and corporate, executives, and worked in a lot of different dimensions. So that's a lovely piece. And then the other piece is just the notion of get everyone aligned around even what they're doing, not what they're deciding. Everything goes into sync. There's an exercise I've done. I haven't done this for a while, but it's popping up via our conversation.
Nice.
The exercise is I'm probably sitting with like 10 or 12 people. And the idea is I say, okay, we have to count, or 12 people, we have to count to 1 to 12, but only one person at a time. And it has to be consecutive. I might have it wrong, but something like that. And just, it fails. It just, it fails. People can't do it. And then, so what we do is we just do a really quiet little 1 minute exercise where we all say the same word. I think it originated with Om, like the meditation Om.
Yeah.
But if people are freaked out by that, you can just use the word one, or you can use whatever word you want. It doesn't matter. But everyone just gets in rhythm saying that. And you do 1, 1, 1. And I set a rhythm and a pattern and a tone. And after doing that a few times, they just buzz right through the exercise. I mean, because their minds and their hearts are aligned. So it works.
Yeah. Even I can already feel, like, as you change the tone of your conversation to talk about that particular example, I can feel a difference in it. I can feel a difference in the conversation when we begin steering away from maybe the problem for a minute and becoming aligned with, it may sound crazy to people, but there's a spiritual notion to a conversation. If you have, it seems to me at least, and I would love to hear your opinion, if we understand that the point of an argument is to solve a problem rather than to win, like, I think that's like almost a spiritual component to it. Like, we're coming into it with an intention of something open and honest. What's your take on that?
Right. Yeah. When I was teaching with Fred Kaufman and Peter Senge through MIT years ago, one of the most interesting distinctions that shocked leaders, it's so simple, but it's so powerful, was the distinction between we're all trained to be knowers. We are trained to have the answer. And, literally think about it, even in elementary school,
Yep.
you raise your hand because you have the answer and you get the gold star. You don't raise your hand and say, wait a minute, I have a question. I don't really understand. Sit down, Tommy.
Exactly. Get out of the room.
Yeah. Next. Anyway, that notion of being trained, and then, as we go to college, we get smart, we become experts, and we get hired to be an expert. So we're hired to be the knowers. There's nothing wrong with knowledge. There's nothing wrong with expertise. But when our psyche is hooked on having the answer or being the smartest one in the room, we can't listen. We can't ask questions. We get defensive. So the opposite side of the equation is, how do you shift from being a knower to being a learner? And that it goes back to your earlier point about the power of asking questions. How do you be a learner? By saying, I have a position, open hand. You have a position. Let me understand your position, right? And that's why listening often fails, because we aren't doing that open-handed work. And so that shift from knower to learner is a dramatic sort of psychic shift for many, many people, especially executives who've been trained to be the smartest ones in the room. And, no judgment there. Is that it's how it unfolds and how they get rewarded. But this notion of that openness to say, I have a different position, but I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to understand. Now that takes us, you sort of mentioned, how can we have these conversations?
Yeah.
Fundamentally, society, cultures, we exist because we have a foundation called facts. because things we can agree on that are indisputable. I've gotten a little messy over the last 8 years, to say the least. But it's oftentimes in tough conversations, I'll say, well, let's ground ourselves in some facts. Are there 3 facts? Are there 5 facts that we can agree on that can be a foundation for us to have another conversation? Because our conversations and our perspectives are made of emotions, facts, and opinions. Stories are made of opinions and facts, and then we have our emotions that follow suit. So this notion of being able to use facts as a grounding is really critical. And I have clients and I have people who I had to disengage from in conversation because I can't, not that I can't find facts, but they won't accept them. Right. So it's really powerful. There was some work done in Sweden years ago. It might still be going on. I think it's called The Next Step. And it was an effort by some scientists to say they were really having a hard time thinking about the environment and responsible corporations, responsible production of equipment, whether it's refrigerators or cars, or everything. Early on, environmental stuff before climate change was really a heavy subject. And they did these interviews with all these folks, and they found that it was just the perspectives were all over the map. And the work of The Next Step was to work with those folks to say, okay, can we find 3 things that we agree on? And they were really fundamental things, like don't produce more than you can take out of the earth, or don't produce things that you can't recycle. They were fundamental things. And those 3 or 4 things that they came up with were incredibly had incredible impact on their industries. In fact, I think there were videos done, and the king, sent this video out to every citizen because this power of saying, here are the things we can agree on, and now when we have to make decisions about the production or environmental decisions, we have some grounding. We have some places to settle our start from to make the good wiser decisions.
Yeah, it is such a fascinating time to be alive. If we think of our language as a living language, and we're constantly defining what different words mean different things to different generations now. It used to be in different eras, but like even in different generations now, you see this changing definitions. And how can we get on the same page when different generations have different definitions of what one word is? How do you have any kind of shared goals or shared sacrifice there?
Yeah. Effort.
So well said.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Effort.
Yeah.
There's no magic pill for that either. It's like,
Right.
listen to their concerns, listen to their standards. Personally, of the 4 things that are the archetypal elements of our judgments and our conversation, standards are one of the least conscious and least appreciated and least used of the 4. If you think about it, every position we have, perspective we have, every hardcore position we take, or every judgment we have, underneath, pretty much in the background of our brain, or inside of our storytelling brain, the story that we're telling is based on standards that we didn't even consciously adopt. Excuse me. We picked them up from our families, our cultures, our education, our work, and so we have standards that drive everything, which are our morals and our values and our and all those things. But yet rarely do they come forth, and rarely can we talk. Do we talk about them openly, or even consciously? And sometimes in arguments, it's just little things. My wife and I would fight for years over, whether we did the dishes before we went to bed,
Yeah.
She likes to go bed like she goes to bed like a maid. She does the dishes and loves the kitchen super clean when she wakes up in the morning. And I'm happy to go to bed like a king, and to hell with the dishes, and I'll wake up as a servant, Um, but
Yeah.
but until all we did was, instead of fighting, all we did was realize, wait a minute, we just have different standards. Nobody's right. And instead of fighting over that, we get to laugh. Okay, who wins tonight? Or okay, I'll help because I'll let you be the little queen tonight, or the maid tonight. And so, but it's that standard that's underneath that we often have battles over. And so that's a light example. But if you think about something more serious, what are my standards or my morals or my whatever about what a leader should look like, or what kind of
Mm.
decisions a leader should be, or how a leader should behave? We all have these, but they're buried. So I like to say we can. Another way of opening our hand, we can share. This is how what I think is right and fair and good, or whatever. Back to my neighbor story. The reason I got triggered was my standard was about what it means to be a good neighbor. If you can help your neighbor out and it's no skin off your back, why would you not do that?
Yep.
And for me, that was unfathomable. They have a different standard, So okay, but those they go a long way to get us off track in conversations. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
For me, that same sort of story that happens between your actions and your words has
Mm.
been a problematic, and maybe it's becoming a little bit older in my life, coming up on 50. I remember for a long time, I would always tell my daughter, like, listen, I love you, and you can become whatever you want to if you believe in yourself and you follow your heart. And I took a look at my life at the age of 48, and I realized I was working a job that maybe I wasn't following my heart. So I can tell my daughter till
Hmm.
I'm blue in the face, do this, but that's not what I'm showing her. And like, as I
Right.
found that in myself, I saw that pattern in myself, and I'm fortunate. I have a wife that loves me, and I found the courage to change and leave something that was really well financially and do something that's not as financially. But there was this space between stimulus and response where, look,
Yep.
I'm lying to my daughter by telling her these things and then not doing them. I can't do that. Like, I get goosebumps when I think about this story, but you can, once you
Yeah.
see the pattern in yourself, you can start seeing it in other people, right? And maybe that's how
That's
we
right.
have real change.
That's right. Yeah. And for you, that was really like that was like these little light awakenings. You get a little
Yeah, of
aha moment, right? You go, whoa, wait a
course,
minute.
fire
Uh,
eventually.
Yeah. And I think um, listening, that the third
Yeah,
conversation is about creativity, and that is about our ability to co-create with other people.
love
But
that.
it's also learning that we are well trained to be in the left side of our brain and be rational and have literal
Mm,
decisions and blah blah. And actually, as uh, 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 science says, the right side of our brain is actually the boss. um, and because it's the intuitive, it connects the dots, it sees bigger things, it's conceptual. Um, but we're that's sort of trained out of us. It's there, but
yep.
we have to re-engage with it. We have to re discover it so we can listen to our intuition. So what you did was a little bit of like, wait a minute, there's this little voice that says, I'm not 100% here. I'm not 100% happy with what I'm doing. And there's something calling,
Yeah.
and can we follow that? I'm on my fourth career. I was a musician. I went to architecture, and then I changed to this world that I'm in, and then I just wrote a book. But each one of those wasn't a rejection of what was before. It was a matter of being attracted to something and
Yep.
acknowledging that and being willing to leap, take
Yes.
a leap of
Yeah.
faith. Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's part of this reacquainting ourselves with our intuition and our creative right side of our brain. Yeah.
I love that, the leap of faith. It's sort of, I had a friend of mine who speaks about, he's the creative director at Christopher Newport University, and he talks about the leap of faith. He's a scholar in medieval mystics, and he talks about, You know,
Mhm.
like hard work, everything. This thing can only get you so far. But in life, you have to hear the calling. You have to hear that voice say to you, "This is the thing," and it won't make any sense, but that's the leap of faith you have to take if you want to really become the best version of yourself. There's no sense for it. There's no real evidence for it. There's just that leap of faith. Maybe you could talk about the
Yeah.
story that you tell yourself when you find yourself in these 4 different transitions, like a death and a rebirth almost.
Yeah. So my latest, the leadership consulting and the trusted, consider myself a trusted advisor and coach. But at some point through that work, I had clients that sort of loved what we were teaching, but kept saying, "Well, where can I read this?" Or, "How can I give this to my family or whatever, or my wife?" Um, well, A, practice with them. B, practice with them, right? But but I a seed was planted in my mind that all the things I learned about the ontology of language and linguistics and the work of Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline of Advocacy and Inquiry, all those things were out there, but they were all um, not together combined or not consolidated. And I thought, you know what, I want to write a book that's accessible, but sort of connects all these dots. It's the spiritual, it's
Yep.
the conversational, it's the power of words, it's the tools, it's the practices, it's the meditation. It's all these things combined, right? That give us awareness and emotional intelligence, and then ways to be. Well, so I had that idea, and then guess what? I had a big story in my mind that I wasn't a writer. I mean,
Mm.
I wrote plenty when I was in architecture school and had to write papers, and then when I was studying the ontology of language, I wrote. But I still had a story that I wasn't a writer, but this notion of the book just would not let go away.
Yeah.
So I finally said, "Oh, fuck it." It was
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, I got to do it. And I did burn through a couple editors that I hired to help me write it, and that never worked. And then I had to finally say, you know what, I can do this myself. And I went back and I started all over again, and I wrote it myself, without a ghostwriter, without an editor, until, of course, an editor later on for copywriting. But that's an example of listening to that call.
Yep.
It was scary because I didn't have faith in myself, and I had to there's a story I had to bust. I had to
Yeah.
bust that story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So each one of
have you
my transitions was was a calling. It was like I was in, I was in music,
yeah.
but I was working in an architecture firm, and I loved what I saw, and I was like fascinated. And I ended up going to architecture school. It was never on my radar screen, right? So sometimes the things that are on our radar screen and they pop up, we gotta listen.
Yeah. It all of them sound like aspects of language to me. Music is a language, architecture is
Mhm.
a language, and when we talk about the environment, sometimes I feel like the environment we live in, the actual our relationship to the world around us is a language. And if you listen, whether you meditate or maybe maybe you take psychedelics, or you have a relationship with
Mhm.
psilocybin, or maybe you're just in tune with nature, you have a favorite song, or whatever it takes for you to be more aware. I believe that the world is constantly trying to talk to you and nudge you and push you in the direction of becoming your best self. And you said it right there so beautifully. Like you just said that I could do it myself. I think that is the lesson the world's trying to teach us. You can do it yourself. Do you have the
Yeah.
courage to take the leap? If you're in the sound of my voice, guess what you do? You can do it yourself, right? Isn't that a
Yep.
language? Don't you think?
Yeah. Well, and it's creating a new story, and and it's creating a new story that doesn't say, "Oh, it's going to be a piece of cake. I got this figured out." It's creating a new story like, I can do this, and I'm willing to do the hard work.
Yeah.
I'm willing to, do 110 drafts and that look
Yep.
like crap, you know, but because the book wants to be written,
Yes.
right? that actual desire is there, and you follow that, and then you have all the hard work. It took me 4 years to transition from architecture to the world of language and leadership, to just retool myself, until I took the leap of faith.
Yeah.
2 young kids, no income,
Totally. Yeah,
6 years of architecture school.
yeah. Was it necessary when you look back at it and you see the progress and see whether it's music or architecture, do you look back at those as sort of like classrooms? Like, was that necessary to be where you are now?
Yeah, it feels to me like none of those were conscious, rational decisions on my part. They were like life unfolding. Uh, um, had I not been involved in music so well, so I was really from an early age. Music was my life. Had I not had that experience, where I really wasn't making a lot of money, I had to get a job to support myself, right? And so that happened to be that I was a low totem pole person in an architecture firm pulling blueprints and doing errands, right?
Yeah.
Had that not happened, I wouldn't have been introduced to the incredible sort of artistic and design parts of architecture that, again, it opened my
Yeah.
eyes, so that all of a sudden there was like, oh, there's a whole world I didn't see before.
Yeah.
And then that led me to go, well, you know what? I'm this little poor boy from Pennsylvania, but I can move to Boston and go to architecture school. Everyone thought I was nuts. I mean, literally, my
Love it.
friends, and not all my family, so I had to overcome that. It was like, oh, that's ridiculous, architecture. And I had to overcome that and take the leap of faith. But it was that incredible attraction, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I couldn't turn down. Yeah.
I love it. I love the way you said that. My wife and I were just recently talking about life and the direction you're going. And sometimes we talk about motivation, but motivation sounds like a push to me. But you described it as an attraction, like something is pulling you towards it. Maybe you can talk about
Right.
that for a moment?
Yeah. So I think motivation probably follows. It's like,
Yeah.
but the attraction is. So when I moved from architecture to studying language, and then getting into consulting and leadership stuff, the reason that happened was that one of my partners, who was an alcoholic, when we grew from a small firm to a medium-sized firm, his behavior became a problem.
Mm.
When we were 4 guys sitting around doing stuff, it wasn't a problem. But when it became a problem for our clients, for our staff, we didn't know what to do. And so we hired in a couple of consultants to help us. What do we do about this? And we burned through a couple of useless consultants. And then a woman whose name is Linda Reed came in, and the way that she engaged with us, she met with us individually, she met with us as a group. She helped us untangle this web of our stories, because we were all locked in these negative stories and anger and blah, 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 all the things that come with those kind of conflicts. She helped us untangle that and did work with each of us individually, work with us as a group, and put it out the other end. I was like flabbergasted. Like, how the hell did she do that? Right. And I've always had a spiritual, psychological, and philosophical interest. I mean, as far as what I read and my thinking, and what she did felt so like that. It's like she just pulled together some psychology and philosophy, but it was all through our conversations, and I just was so attracted to it. I couldn't let it go. We became friends. I learned from her a little bit. We did a little bit of work together around mediation in the building industry, because I knew the building industry and she knew the mediation stuff. And that put me on a journey. I couldn't let go of this incredible sort of like, wow, this is magical stuff. and I wanted to learn the magic,
Yeah.
and so I did work with her. I did mediation training. I did the ontology of language, and I did a body mind therapy program where I understood body mind therapy work.
Yeah.
And then 4 years later, I gave my partnership back and I jumped ship. But it was that incredible sort of attraction. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so mesmerizing to me. Chuck, I told you before the show, like an hour was gonna feel like 5 minutes. It feels like 4. Like I literally have 25 questions here, and I think I asked one of them. So, but that is the mark of a great conversation. Is that
Yeah.
I'm so enthralled by it. And for those in the sound of my voice, Chuck's new book right now coming out that he has it's already out now. You can get it in stores. There'll be a link down below. The Art of Conscious Conversation. I would recommend everybody within the sound of my voice go down and check it out. Reach out to Chuck yourself if you want to. He's an amazing individual,
Yep.
and the book has got so many cool mnemonic devices and tools and guideposts to help you understand things. But before I let you go, Chuck, where can people find you? What do you got coming up, and what are you excited about?
Okay, so people can get an introduction, a PDF introduction to the book on my website. There's just a link to give your email, and then you can get a PDF of the introduction. And on my website also, they can write me a note. If anyone's interested in starting a conversation or interested in work, they can get me there with my email. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Threads. Chuck_Wisner. And currently, I'm doing more individual work with people than I am corporate work. That shifted with COVID because virtual reality now I can work with people from all over the world. And I'm also, because of the book, I'm doing a lot of podcasts, which if there's anybody else out there that wants to have me as a guest, I'm doing it just because I want to get the word out there about the book. And that's important to me. And then also I'm doing speaking engagements, so I can sort of condense the material and then give people a hit on how they could change a culture or how they could change their corporate sort of work through conversations.
Yeah, well, I would recommend, like I said, people go down, check out the book, reach out to you yourself, and it's mind-blowing to me. You'll have to come back and maybe we can have a panel of people because, like I said, we just kind of scratched the surface, and there's so much more
Yeah.
about culture and spirituality and linguistics and the evolving nature of meaningful conversations that I would love to talk to you about. So let's plan for a part 2 coming up here in the future.
I'd love it. There's plenty more to talk about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hang on
Yeah.
briefly afterwards. But to everybody else who was listening
Yep.
and hanging out with us today, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a beautiful day. And that's all we got, ladies and gentlemen. Aloha.